What is up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpon. This is Phil's Guide to PsyD. This channel is dedicated to all things clinical psychology, wellness, and graduate school. Today, the question that we're going to go through is clinical psychology a good career? With that, we're actually going to start with the cons first. Con number one is that in order to be a clinical psychologist, you have to get a bachelor's degree. Now, this may not seem like such a big con, but especially with college tuition really picking up, a lot of people are really trying to decide whether or not they want to go to college just because it's so expensive to go to school. Another reason why that might be a potential con is that if you major in something like psychology, but you don't end up going into a master's or going to a doctorate with that degree, then you're going to have limited options in terms of what you can do with a psychology degree. Now, there are plenty of different things you can do with a psychology degree, but it may not be the things that you may want to do, right? And so just keep that in mind. A lot of times people will actually major in the things that they like and that they prefer. So for example, they might major in business or finance or accounting or English, and they can still take all the necessary courses, the prerequisite courses, in order to apply to grad school. But if they don't get into graduate school, they still have something to fall back on. So for example, if someone majored in business, but they made sure to take classes like Intro to Psychology, Developmental Psychology, other different psychology courses, by the time they get to their senior year, they might apply for a doctoral program in clinical psychology, so a PhD or PsyD in clinical psychology. And let's say they don't get in, right? So now they have a couple different options, because at least their major is going to help them get a job right out of school, so they can start working in some business related field or whatever it is, right? If you major in English, maybe you can go into being an English teacher. If you major in some other related field that can help you get a job right after college, that is great, because one of the things that's going to be really helpful is that even if you do spend, let's say, 2 or 3 or 4 years working in whatever degree that you got, at least you can perhaps pay off those student loan debt. You can prepare yourself to maybe apply again to a clinical or counseling psychology program, and you could see if whether or not you can get in the second time, right? And so a lot of people actually do apply multiple times to clinical psychology programs just because it is so competitive. So that's one thing to look out for in terms of maybe potentially making this con into a pro. So the con overall is you have to get a bachelor's degree. The pro in that is that you choosing whatever major that you choose, just make sure that you might have a potential backup plan just in case clinical psychology doesn't work out. Okay, so the second con is that you might need a master's degree. Now, this isn't for everybody. Specifically in the United States, you do not need a master's degree in psychology to then get into a clinical psychology program. There are many people who will get their bachelor's degree, apply to clinical psychology PhD programs, and get in right away, where they can skip getting a master's. It's not for everybody. It's not the case for everybody, but it does happen. And actually, I think for a lot of different programs, they really don't care whether or not you have a master's or not. If you have really good GRE scores, good letters of recommendation, good grades in college, you're going to be pretty competitive as it is, right? And so what might be the reason to getting a master's? Well, sometimes if you apply the first time and you don't get in, schools will suggest that. And that's what I always will tell students, is that don't get a master's just because you think it's going to be necessary, because you might apply to a program and they may not care, or they may accept you right away. So it wouldn't necessarily hurt. Get done with your undergrad, get your bachelor's degree, and just apply right away and see if you get in. If you get in, great. You didn't have to go into a master's program. If you don't get in, and you can specifically ask the school, hey, I know you guys rejected me. I know that I didn't get in. Do you think it would be helpful for me to get a master's program or go into a master's program? If they say yes, then you have your answer right there. In fact, I know a lot of students who got their bachelor's degree, applied to clinical psychology programs, didn't get in, and then they asked the school, hey, what can I do to make my application better? And they told them, well, you're probably going to need a master's in psychology. So they went and got a master's in psychology and then reapplied after they finished, and then they got in, right? And so if you can get the bachelor's degree and see what your options are. And if you need a master's, go into a master's. If you don't need it, well, then you can save all of that time and money going into something else. All right, so the second con is that you might potentially need a master's program, and if you're not sure, contact the schools and ask them directly. Now, is it possible to become a clinical psychologist with a master's degree? Well, at least in the United States, not really. In the United States, you need a doctorate. You need a doctorate in PsyD program, from a PsyD program or a PhD program. That's the only way that you can practice independently, whether it's at a hospital or private practice or whatever it is. The only way that you can call yourself a psychologist in the US is if you have a doctorate degree. So the third con is that you will have to go into a PhD or a PsyD program, which means that it's going to take more time. Usually PsyD programs are anywhere from 4 to 5 years, and PhD programs are anywhere from 4 to 6 or 7 years. The fourth con is that even after you get your PsyD or your PhD degree, you are still going to have to get an internship. Let's say you go into your PsyD program, you do your 4 years of school. Now, in order to graduate from that program, you've gone through the 4 years of school, but you still need that 1 year internship. That 1 year internship is what technically helps you to graduate from that program. So the con is that, yes, it's going to take another year, more time, just to become a clinical psychologist. The fifth con is that your education can be really, really expensive, especially if you go into a PsyD program. Most PsyD programs aren't funded. Now, I say that, and if you were to research a lot of clinical psychology PhD programs, there's actually a good amount of clinical psychology PhD programs that aren't funded as well. So it's not just PsyD programs, it's PhD programs as well. There are way more PhD programs that are fully funded, but again, those are going to be the ones that are probably more competitive, and so you just have to kind of be aware of that. But that is a huge con. Con number 5 is going to be that your education is going to be expensive. The sixth con, what I would say, is really trying to figure out how you're going to pay for your education, right? So the fifth con is it's going to be expensive. The sixth con is trying to figure out how you're going to pay for your education. If you're going to go into graduate school and you're going to have all of this debt that you're never going to be able to get out of, I don't know how advantageous or how wise that might be. Now, you might have to get some more advice from mentors or advisors, and maybe talk to those clinical psychology programs, work with their financial aid, do whatever you need to do to make sure that you have a plan after graduate school to pay off the loan. What are you going to do in graduate school to live under budget, right? In terms of food. One of the things that I think was really important for me to do is that even before I went into graduate school, I had to figure out exactly, specifically how much I was going to spend every month. So I had to have a really strict, controlled budget to make sure I knew exactly where my money was going, where money was coming in, where money was coming out, what I needed for my loans. But it's really important to at least have a tentative plan on how you're going to pay off this money, because it's not like you can just not think about it and it'll go away. It'll still be there even if you're not thinking about it. Now, the seventh con is that you have to obtain a licensure to practice. And yeah, guys, I know I'm naming a lot of cons, but this is just real stuff that you guys have to think about. Licensure takes a long time as well. And studying for the EPPP is no easy feat. Now, most people do pass on their first time, but there is some studying to do. And in order to study, you have to get materials, you have to make sure that you can schedule your exam, you have to get ready for your exam. There's a lot of different things that go into that. And a lot of times when people study for this exam, they are in their clinical rotations, their internships, their postdocs, and so they're doing a number of other different things at the same time. So putting some time away to study for that could be really, really difficult. Now, the eighth con is that you may be working some really odd hours. Now, I think what's great about clinical psychology, and we'll talk about this in the cons, is that there's so many different places that you can work as a psychologist, but keep in mind that in terms of a work-life balance, There's a lot of psychologists that do not necessarily have that because they either have to work an odd number of hours, because when people can do therapy, it tends to be either really early in the morning or after they get home from work and so forth. And so there are actually a lot of therapists and psychologists who work Saturdays because those days tend to be the days that people can do therapy and see treatment. The ninth con is that if you want to have a private practice, right? If you want to kind of do your own thing and kind of maybe hire some other psychologists on board, there's a lot of work involved in that, right? First of all, you have to find a place. You have to go through the hiring process. You have to go through bookkeeping and management and malpractice insurance, and it takes a lot of work. And so keep that in mind, that it might sound really, really great in terms of being a clinical psychologist and kind of doing your own thing. But there's a lot of work involved even after you get your degree in terms of really actually going after some of the things that you want to go after. The last thing, the 10th con that I will mention for you guys is that you have to think about the emotional stamina that it takes in order to become a psychologist. You're going to be seeing patients from morning to afternoon. A lot of clinical psychologists have a caseload of anywhere from 20 to 30 to 40 patients in 1 week. Many clinical psychologists are working anywhere from 40 to 60 hours a week, and maybe even potentially more depending on where they're working. And so in terms of the emotional stamina that it takes to listen to someone and to help someone go through a lot of their mental health issues, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy and emotional input and emotional drive to stay focused and to stay present. And so I think that's why it's so important, especially on this channel, that I talk about self-care and I talk about ways that you guys, even in graduate school, can give back to yourself, because it's so, so important. If you are just giving everybody all of your energy, you're not going to have anything else to fill yourself up in terms of your tank. And so it's really important in terms of the emotional stamina of the job. A lot of clinical psychologists do get burnt out. And so that's one con to think about in terms of the long term of how long you can sustain doing what you're doing for year after year, decade after decade, and so on and so forth. If you guys have any questions about anything that I mentioned, put it down in the comment section below. I'll be sure to take a look at that. But with that, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel and to this video. Hopefully, I will see you guys in the next video.